Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at the CHE State Scholarship and Grant Workshop Series. Today, we have Ms. Catherine Harris speaking to us about the Palmetto Fellows Scholarship. We do ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation, or you can add them in the chat at any time, and we will address them at the end. Okay, I'm going to give it away to Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Tanya. I just want to first start by welcoming everybody for joining us. We had set this workshop up as like a new financial aid counselor workshop. We do recognize that we are having a lot of new individuals working in post-secondary education in the state of South Carolina. So we thought if we could do sessions to help our offices with the lift of training, that would be beneficial. So this is going to be very thorough and it's going to be very regulation heavy. You will get this presentation at the end of the workshop. We will email it out as well. We are recording this training and that will be loaded to our YouTube. And so you will have access to that link as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And as Tanya said, you can throw questions in the comments in the chat section, or we will hit them at the end. But I want to make sure we get through everything as we're going. So first things first, and I may be a little old school, but one of the very first things they taught me when I started in a financial aid office was you don't need to know everything, you just need to know where to find the answers. So we wanted to start by showing you on our website under students, families, and militaries, you can find South Carolina scholarships and grants. This is the direct link to our webpage. This QR code will also take you there. From the web page, there is a drop down for each one of our funding programs, and under those we'll have the additional links. We also, and some of you may be familiar with this, we've also put our trainings in a different section on the website. So for institutions and educators, you'll click on that. And then if you click on state scholarships, policies, and regulations, all the regs are linked there. And then at the very bottom will be related trainings. That's where PowerPoints have been loaded for our workshops from this summer. So you can find them there as well. Okay, so first, as we get into this, we are going to cover quite a bit of regulation that pertains to all of our state scholarships and grants programs. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. General definitions. So the layout of our slides today, on the left-hand side, you're going to see boxes that pertain to each one of our funding programs, and then it will list the code for the regulation and the number in which you can find this specific definition. So if you ever need to look it up when you're going back through this, this is where you would locate that in the regulation. So the first definition is academic year. It's a 12-month period of time during which a full-time student is expected to earn 30 credit hours. So for your purposes, for South Carolina state funding, our academic year, summer is our trailer. So we start with fall, spring, and then summer term. So our year starts with fall and ends with summer. Home institution definition is the independent or public institution where the student is enrolled as a full-time degree-seeking student, and the home institution would be the institution that processes their financial aid. Continuously enrolled is defined for life and Palmetto Fellows as enrollment without an interruption that would require the student to apply for readmission. So students who are enrolled in internships, cooperative work programs, travel programs, exchange programs are approved by the home institution are considered to be continuously enrolled, as well as students who attend summer terms or any students who have a military mobilization. Those students are also considered continuously enrolled. Date of initial college enrollment. It's defined as the first time a student matriculates into a post-secondary degree granting institution after high school graduation, excluding the summer term immediately prior to the student's enrollment. So it's the first fall term after high school graduation that the student enrolls. So they must remain continuously enrolled, as any break in enrollment excluding summer would count towards the student's terms of eligibility. So that's for Palmetto Fellows Life and Hope. Most of you, by looking at the participants list, you guys are familiar with this, but the scholarship clock, once you start enrollment, you can't stop. So there's no built-ins in there for leave of absence, or a lot of times what we're hearing now is they're like, oh, I took a gap year between year one and year two. That's not how a gap year works. So based on the initial date of college enrollment, once the student enrolls in college, their clock has begun, and any deviations from that would fall into a scholarship appeal. General eligibility requirements for all of our funding programs: they must be a South Carolina resident, they must be a US citizen or a legal permanent resident, they must also be enrolled as a degree-seeking student at an eligible South Carolina institution. They cannot owe a refund or repayment on any state or federal aid, or be in default on a federal student loan, and they cannot be convicted of any felonies or second or subsequent alcohol related, drug related misdemeanors within the past academic year. And the exception to that last one is for our LTAP program. So financial aid awarding language for all of our programs. Independent and public institutions of higher learning in the state are prohibited from using state scholarship grants in programs that promote financial aid incentives or packages. Any mention of state scholarships and grants in these packages must indicate that the scholarships or grants be separated from the university is offering the financial aid package. So one common example of this, if you are advertising free tuition and your state funding is going to pay that tuition, it needs to be specified that the state funding is paying the tuition. Ranking option for out-of-state students. So for Life and Palmetto Fellows, they have to be ranked with an SCU GPA and SAT or ACT criteria when attempting to qualify for either the Life or the Palmetto Fellows. The Palmetto Fellows does have an alternative criteria, and as you guys are aware with Life, they can qualify without a test score. So for schools from out of state, they would need to convert their GPA to the SCU GPA in order to determine class rank, if their grading policy has deviated from South Carolina's uniform grading policy. So Act 280 is the South Carolina Illegal Immigration Reform Act. So what this says is that all institutions that participate in our program must verify lawful presence of the student who receives a state scholarship or grant. So the institution has to develop and institute a process by which scholarship or grants recipients' lawful presence is verified with the federal government. It also goes on to define lawful presence as individuals who are in the United States legally and documented. Only those students who have lawful presence that has been verified with the federal government prior to college enrollment will be considered in order to receive any scholarship or grant for state purposes. So accountability language for the South Carolina residency and scholarships. So the participating institution has to identify a representative to CHE who will be responsible for determining your student's residency. So a lot of times that person is clarified as the residency officer, if you will. So you just have to designate someone, you have to communicate that to us, and then the CEO at your institution has to identify an institutional representative for the operation of the program on the campus. So who will be the fiscal agent at your institution that will receive and deliver the funds from our programming? So you have to specify that person as well. And then this is our program administration slide for residency. So each one of the institutions have to determine lawful presence prior to awarding funding. If at any point in time it's determined that there was a failure to determine lawful presence and South Carolina residency, the institution will need to reimburse those funds to CHE that were dispersed in error. And so over here on the right, this is the regulation for each of our programming based on funding having to be returned. So that takes us into our appeal cycle. I mentioned it briefly earlier when we talked about the clock terms for your program. So we have an appeal cycle at CHE every year. This is the first year we have expanded that. We now have an early appeal and a late appeal. The intention of that was to try and help kids that aren't ready to re-enroll in fall, so they could apply in the late period and receive potentially their scholarship prior to returning in the spring instead of having to get it after the fact. We have different extenuating circumstances categories that students can appeal for. So the first one is serious health condition of the student. The second would be death or serious health condition of an immediate family member. And then we also have traumatic or extraordinary event. So when your students are appealing, if they've never been awarded the Life, the Hope, the South Carolina, or the Palmetto Fellows, they are not eligible to appeal. These are not appeals for students who are appealing because they were never eligible. A student cannot appeal the loss of the scholarship due to the institution's lack of or failure to provide adequate accommodations. That specifically would be tied to, for example, a note taker, extended test time, attendance flexibility, breaks in class, for example. And then a traumatic event does not include college adjustment issues, homesick problems with roommates. It can also not include misunderstanding of scholarship requirements, misadvisement by financial aid officers or advisors, transportation issues, financial issues, exceptions to scholarship regulations such as initial eligibility, which we mentioned in the first one, transfer issues, and exceeding terms of eligibility. This obviously is not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the ones that we see pretty regularly that students are trying to appeal for. Scholarships appeal. So the couple things the students need to understand when they appeal: their appeal may not be granted. So they need to take necessary actions with their institution, such as a payment plan or other funding in place, because depending upon when they submit the appeal, it may be decided upon after the bill is due. So they need to go ahead and make arrangements with the institution. We never guarantee a decision will be rendered prior to any of your institutional deadlines for fee payment. And it is the student's responsibility to ensure that their financial obligations to the institution have been fulfilled. If we award the appeal or grant the appeal, the funds could be awarded retroactively. We will communicate those directly to the contact in your financial aid office. A completed appeals application has to be filed with the commission by the established deadline each year. And it needs to include the application form, the student's letter requesting appeal, explaining their circumstance. They have to include official transcripts from all of their prior institutions. So if it includes dual enrollment from high school, we are going to need those dual enrollment transcripts, especially for our life kids, because we need those courses in order to calculate a life GPA. And then any supporting documentation. Our guidelines for appeal are very thorough. The student can, look at the exact extenuating circumstance they're looking, and we give them examples of what supporting documentation should be submitted with the appeal. It's the student's responsibility to make sure all their documentation is received. We cannot guarantee that we will have the ability to contact the student regarding missing and incomplete documentation. We do try, but if it's submitted on the date of the deadline, then there's no time for us to contact them to get additional documentation submitted. Okay, so for auditing, the CHE is responsible for oversight functions, guidelines, policy, rules, and regulations. So we are responsible to make sure the funding is being allocated correctly within the guidelines. within the regulations. So we do have a couple auditors that provide oversight as necessary to monitor the expenditure of funding. So the audit policy states that all eligible independent and public institutions must abide by all program policies, regulations, and rules. You agree and maintain to provide all pertinent information to our auditors, records, reports, to ensure that you are administrating the program correctly on your campus. Student records. So some of the things that have to be maintained, these are outlined in each one of our regulations. These are required for you to keep a record of, and that could be, hopefully it is electronic record and not a paper record, but we will not judge you if you are still keeping a paper record, I promise. Award notification, enrollment in a degree seeking status, residency status, citizenship, the affidavit of certification stating that the student is not in default and does not owe a refund. Also that they've never been convicted of any felonies or second or subsequent drug-related misdemeanors, institutional disbursements to the student, military orders if appropriate, verification from institutional disability services provider if the student has an approved reduced course load, verification of a cumulative GPA, credit hours earned for renewal purposes, verification from academic department of enrollment in a declared major in an eligible degree program if the student has the enhancement, and then verification of student meeting 14 credit hour requirement at the end of first year for the enhancement purposes. Okay, military mobilization. So this is for students who were enrolled in college and are affected by military mobilization. The regulation states that they will not be penalized for the term that they are required, term or terms that they are required to withdraw after the full refund period based on the institutional policies and procedures. So, if the term that the service member is mobilized will not count against their maximum terms either. If they are forced to withdraw as a result of their military mobilization, they are allowed to receive the unused terms of their scholarship and their enhancement while they are mobilized. So for students who are in the military who are mobilized, basically they're not penalized for having to withdraw or missing a term based on military service. The service member must re-enroll in an eligible institution within 12 months upon their demobilization, and they must provide documentation to verify the military deployment to the institutional financial aid office upon re-enrollment in order to receive their scholarship or their scholarship enhancement. Their reinstatement will be based upon the eligibility at the time that they were mobilized. Service members who are enrolled in college and mobilized for an entire academic year may renew their scholarship for the next academic year if they met the eligibility requirements at the end of the prior year. And then for service members who are enrolled in college and are mobilized for one academic term, they must complete the 15 credit hours in the 3.0 life GPA or the 3.0 institutional GPA, depending upon scholarship, by the end of the academic year. So that's for students who were gone one term. Okay, internships, co-ops, work programs, travel programs, national or international exchange programs. So this is for Palmetto Fellows in Life. They may use the appropriated portion of their funding for a program that is approved by the home institution and that the home institution is accepting as full-time transfer credit. So it has to be approved by your institution and you have to be accepting it for full-time transfer credit. So the funding would be paid directly to the student's home institution. The amount awarded cannot exceed the cost of attendance at the home institution or the cost of attendance at the host institution, whichever is less. These vary by terms of in the reg. So if you have a student in this and you're looking to see, you're probably going to have to pull the reg on this and look to see. So for a student who enrolls in one academic term at their home institution and then enrolls in a work program, travel study program, that are approved by the home institution, but they do not award full-time transfer credit during the same academic year, must earn at least 15 credit hours and a minimum 3.0 cumulative grade point at the home institution for graduation purposes by the end of the academic year in order to be eligible for renewal for next year. And then the next scenario is for students who enroll in the program that is approved by their home institution, but the home institution is not awarding full-time transfer credit for the entire academic year. Renewal for the next academic year will be based off the prior year's eligibility. The, the home institution will be responsible for obtaining official certification for the student's cumulative grade point and credit hours earned for enhancement eligibility. The home institution must obtain certification from the academic department or enrollment in a declared major at the eligible degree program if they're in a co-op. Students with disabilities. So for Life and Palmetto Fellows, the regulation states that under ADA and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, they must meet all requirements as stated in the continuing eligibility section, except if the student does not meet the annual credit hour requirement. The institution must have been approved by the disability services provider in the prior academic year to be enrolled less than full-time status or less than the required 30. So each year, students must complete the required number of credit hours approved by their institutional disability services provider for their scholarship enhancement renewal and earn either the 3.0 life GPA or the cumulative home institution GPA. The institutional disability service provider must provide written documentation to the Office of Financial Aid prior to each academic year, verifying that the student is approved to be enrolled in a less than full-time status. Okay, so suspension or termination of institutional participation. So for each one of our programs, Regulation A states that the CHE may review institutional administrative practices to determine compliance. If a review determines that the institution has failed to comply with the statute, guidelines, rules, or regulation, CHE may suspend, terminate, or place certain conditions upon the institution's participation in the program. CHE will notify the institution in writing of the nature if there are allegations or conduct in an audit. And then the audit will indicate what the violations are that may have occurred or are occurring. And the institution will be required to secure, or CHE will be required to secure immediate reimbursement from the institution for those funding. Okay. Woo. So that takes us into the Palmetto Fellows. So now we're going to talk specifically about Palmetto Fellows. So all of these regs are specific to Palmetto Fellows. So 62-315 covers initial eligibility. It just states that the student has to meet the criteria under the application. They have to be enrolled as a senior in an eligible high school, classified as a South Carolina resident at the time of college enrollment, be a U.S. citizen, lawful permanent resident, lawful presence has been verified by the federal government at the time of enrollment at the institution, and a student must be a legal permanent resident of the U.S. before they can be considered for South Carolina residency. So we have a year-round processing timeline for Palmetto Fellows. We get applications ongoing. It's open for the whole year. We continuously process those applications as they come in. We have a 1-month processing time frame from the point in time that we receive the paper application. So once we process them and we render a decision, That student is then loaded into our data system, and then we email the students a notification email. Our data system talks in real time to the Palmetto Fellows portal. So once they're loaded in the system, that student is reflective in the Palmetto Fellows portal. So this is the timeline for processing that we released to all the high school counselors this year. It might be beneficial for your offices if you're meeting with prospective families on how they can meet qualification requirements. So we currently have the early award open right now. It's been open since May 1st of 23. This is for the class of 24, or what we commonly call the 24 cohort. So we started processing applications in September of 23. That was when we got our first actual paper application. So we have started processing, students have started getting notifications. The testing cutoff date for the early award is March of 24. So the March 8th ACT or the March 9th SAT will be the last time they can test to try and reach a qualifying test score for the early award, because we then close the early award on April 15th of 2024. We're closed for a month while we process all the applications that we got the week that it closed, and then we will open the late award on May 15th of 2024. And so the last absolute testing date that the class of 24 graduate can test to qualify would be June 1st SAT or June 8th ACT. And so those students would need to be submitted to CHE as pending, and they would need to send their test score directly to us. We close the late award for the class of 24 on June 28th of 24, and then we will be processing these throughout the summer as we receive the students' test scores. So the way our application funnel works is applications are submitted by the student and family through the high school counselor or homeschool association representative. It comes to CHE. We award early award applications are May through April. Late award applications are May through June. CHE notifies the students if they have met the academic criteria along with terms and conditions. And then the student must complete a designation form indicating the institution they will attend in the fall. So I mentioned the Palmetto Fellows portal before. If you are unfamiliar with what the Palmetto Fellows portal is, it is a way for us to communicate with the institutions in a much quicker time frame than we were able to when we were just sending out protected spreadsheets. So this up here at the top is the website for the portal. So I would encourage that you guys bookmark that. Institutions will receive Palmetto Fellows notifications through the portal. In the portal, you are going to have two lists that should be visible to you. The first one is the eligible no institution selected. So as we process applications each year, all students go on that list. Everyone. They're eligible for Palmetto Fellows. They haven't submitted their institution to us yet. And then the second list is your school specific list. So those students go off the eligible no selected list once they tell us their school choice. So they will pop off of list 1 and show up on list 2 for that specific school. Last year, we did not start keying any designations until January. So we will communicate that to you when we start keying them. So until we do, all students will show on the eligible no institution selected list, and that means that they are a Palmetto Fellow. The one thing I would caution you about the portal is that passwords deactivate after 60 days of inactivity. You can shoot an email to our scholarships at che.sc.gov to request password resets if you get locked out. So when you log into the portal, this is what the login screen looks like. You'll use your username and your password. You can also change the password from there if you need to. When you log in under institutional users, you will see view eligible Palmetto Fellow students. That is what you will click on. And then you will have eligible no institution selected. You'll make sure you're on the right cohort. And this will reflect all students who have not completed their designation form yet. and then your institutional page. So if you click on the drop down where it says eligible no institution, you shouldn't see all of these. This is what it looks like for us. You should just see your institution. So if you don't see your institution or you see all of these institutions, please let me know. We need to get your settings corrected. So once they've submitted a designation form for you, they will show on your specific page. Awarding policies and procedures. So basically what 62-330 is saying is that Palmetto Fellows is last dollar. All other sources of gift aid, including federal, state, private, institutional funds, must be applied to the unmet cost of attendance before you can calculate the scholarship or the enhancement, but that they can go to cost of attendance. So the short of it is that Palmetto Fellows is last dollar. It should be awarded last. Having said that, if you are at a 2-year institution, you will have the South Carolina Workforce Industry Needs Scholarship, which we call SC Wins. And so we do want to point out that SC Wins is in state statute as last dollar. So in any situation like that, statute would trump regulation. So if you are at a 2-year school and you have a student who is eligible for Palmetto Fellows and SC Wins, you will need to determine their eligibility by obviously looking at need first and then determining non-need based aid. And then you will calculate PFS eligibility. So this is going to be the same way for our 2 years that they would award life at basically the same way that they would award life. And then they would do the calculation of SC Wins last as the final step. This only applies if you have a student who qualifies for both Palmetto Fellows and SC Wins. If the student does not qualify for SC Wins, you would award Palmetto Fellows last to cost of attendance per regulation. Renewal of awards. Students have to be continuously enrolled for Palmetto Fellows and eligible 2-year or 4-year institutions. Students with a break in continuous full-time enrollment at either a 2-year or 4-year will forfeit their scholarship. If they have an extenuating circumstance, they can submit a scholarship appeal. The regulation goes on to say, so this is our terms of eligibility based on degree program. 62-335C states that PFS can be renewed annually for no more than 2 terms towards a 1-year certificate or diploma, 4 terms based on date of initial college enrollment towards a first associate degree or 2-year diploma program, or 8 terms towards a first bachelor's degree, and no more than 10 terms based on date of initial college enrollment toward a first approved 5-year degree program. The enhancement terms of condition are no more than 6 terms based on date of initial college enrollment toward first bachelor's degree, or a program of study that is structured so that doesn't require a bachelor's but leads to a graduate degree, or no more than 8 terms toward a first approved 5-year bachelor's degree program. The other key point out of Regulation C here is that during the final term of attendance, the institution may prorate the PFS and the enhancement award amount if the student doesn't need to attend full time. So proration in that sense would be based on credit hours or on 12 credit hours. D goes on to say that the institution is responsible for obtaining institutional certification of the cumulative grade point and the annual credit hours earned for renewing the scholarship. And then for the enhancement, you have to have verification that the academic department of enrollment was on the eligible degree programs list. Regulation E goes on to say by the end of the spring term each year, if the student has not met the Palmetto Fellows continuing eligibility requirements, the institution is required to notify them. And I think most of our institutions at this point have that built into their systems, but they are required to notify the student. 62-335G goes on to say that the student has to be enrolled and be continuously enrolled at an eligible institution as a full-time degree-seeking student at the time of disbursement. And they have to have the 3.0 GPA and the 30 credit hours for graduation purposes. In order to retain eligibility for the enhancement, the student must be continuously enrolled, a full-time degree-seeking student in a declared eligible degree program for the enhancement. They have to be making satisfactory academic progress, and they must be enrolled in second, third, or fourth, or even fifth year at an eligible 4-year institution. So the key word there is 4-year. So our students at 2 years can earn the enhancement at year 1, but they will not receive the funding until they go to the 4-year. Successfully complete at least 14 credit hours of instruction in mathematics, life, or physical science, or a combination of both during their first year of college enrollment or thereafter. So it's thereafter of 2007, which was when we put the enhancement in. So for the students to qualify for the enhancement, they have to complete the 14 credit hours. So this graphic just covers that. So 14 credit hours math science by the end of first academic year. For enhancement purposes, we will count AP, IB, dual enrollment, CLEP, or exempted. They must also be enrolled in an eligible degree program at their home institution. And it starts the student's second year. They get 6 terms up to 6 terms at a 4-year institution only. The enhancement amount is an additional $2,500 per year. So you've heard me say repeatedly, a list of eligible majors and eligible courses. We have those on our website. The student and the family cannot assume that one program is approved at one institution and not at the other, because the approvals come from the institution's provost's office submitting the programs to our SEER committee for review. So we will always refer them to the list on our website. This is the direct link for eligible majors and eligible coursework for the 14 credit hours. Institutional disbursement of funds, 62360D states students who change their major from an ineligible degree program to an eligible degree program during the same academic year cannot be awarded the Palmetto Fellows Enhancement until the next academic year. So what did that mean? So students who change their major from an ineligible program to an eligible program can receive the enhancement the next academic year. If the student is in an eligible program at the start of the year, awarded the enhancement, and then they change to an ineligible program mid-academic year, they will retain the enhancement for the current academic year. However, they will not be able to receive the enhancement for the future academic year because they are no longer in an eligible program. So when we're talking about enhancements and disbursements of funding, so for the first year for Palmetto Fellows, it can be up to $6,700. Years 2, 3, and 4, it increases up to $7,500. And if the student qualifies for the enhancement at a 4-year institution, instead of $7,500 for 2, 3, and 4, it would go up to $10,000 for years 2, 3, and 4. Enhancements. So A states that for a student enrolled at a 2-year or 4-year public institution, they can transfer to another eligible institution once they obtain approval from CHE. So what that says is basically the student has to submit the transfer form to us in order to move their scholarship. Their scholarship will not automatically move for them. They can't just go to the new institution and say, hey, I was a Palmetto Fellow. They have to submit the form to CHE and initiate the transfer request through CHE. B goes on to state that a student who applied for and was offered the scholarship in their senior year of high school but declined to go out of state, they can apply for, if they choose to come back in state, they can submit a reapplication form to the commission to have their eligibility reviewed to see if they are eligible to receive the Palmetto Fellows at the in-state institution. Um, Transfer students and reapplication students must comply with all standard and continuing eligibility requirements, and they must be in an eligible 2-year or 4-year institution for Palmetto Fellows in order to be determined at their institution. 62-340C states transfer students and reapplication students are only eligible to receive for their remaining terms of funding. So that's part of what CHE will initiate when the student submits either the transfer form or the reapplication form to CHE. We will help determine what their remaining terms of eligibility are through that process. So looking at the process in a workflow, the student will submit either their transfer or the reapplication form to CHE. CHE confirms their initial eligibility, and then we will reach out to the new South Carolina institution. The institution will review transcripts to verify renewal criteria have been met. And then they also need to verify residency because the student is being admitted to a new program. Institution will then inform CHE if the student is eligible or ineligible. Institution at that time can award if the student is eligible. CHE will email the student letting them know it's been processed. If the student is determined to be ineligible, we also send them an email explaining why they are ineligible. So E goes on to say, by the end of the spring term, the institution must notify all Palmetto Fellows who have not met the continuing eligibility requirement. As I stated before, I think you guys all have this built into your systems to automatically happen. The notification must tell the student that they have the ability to attend summer in order to regain those eligibility requirements before the fall term. And this is the same regulation that is in Life and Hope as well. 62-380 F, after the last day to register for each term, the academic year will verify enrollment of each recipient that is a South Carolina resident and full-time degree-seeking student. At that point in time, the institution can submit a request for funding or return funds by the established deadline each term. A listing of eligible recipients by identification number with award amounts must be sent to the commission. Any unused funds will need to be returned to the commission. So this happens through 2 processes. You submit renewal data to CHE through the Palmetto Fellows portal, through Miss Tanya Weigold. The other process is that you will then submit your SHEMIS data and enrollment data through our IT and data department. In the event a student withdraws, expelled, drops below full-time after the institution's refund period, so we get emails on this. So therefore, they must pay the tuition and fees for full-time enrollment. The award may be retained by the student pursuant to the refund policies at the institution. I just got an email on that last week. C states, in the event a student who has been awarded either the Palmetto Fellow Scholarship or the enhancement has been identified to not be a South Carolina resident at any time, the institution must send those funds back to CHE for the period of time the student was no longer a South Carolina resident. Okay, so year-round scholarship. So this applies to Palmetto Fellow and Life. The authorization of Palmetto Fellows and Life funds to be awarded in summer term continues. The provision initially included was moved from the lottery section of Part 1B to provisos in CHE section. The text of the proviso, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, it's 11.5 if you guys are trying to look it up, is the same as last year with a minor change in keeping the guidelines. And then the year-round guidelines can be accessed from our website, and the link is right there. Okay, so here's the proviso, CHE scholarship awards. And so basically what it says, a student may receive Palmetto Fellows or Life Award during the summer term, in addition to fall and spring terms of each academic year, provided that the student met the continuing eligibility requirements at the end of the spring term prior to summer. So students must enroll full-time for summer. And that would be at least 12 credit hours over the course of the summer. Summer is defined as the period between the end of the spring term prior to the opening of fall. So I know depending upon your institution, you have multiple summer terms. So there's a very broad definition of summer for you. The total summer award per student may not exceed half of the allowable academic year award amount. Okay. If students are eligible, so full-time summer enrollment for eligible students, eligible for fall award if they are enrolled in 12 plus credit hours or equivalent full-time status. They're eligible for a spring award if they're enrolled in 12 plus credit hours or full-time status. And then, so we're talking about summer term here, eligible for summer award if they earned 30 credit hours or the equivalent hours for fall and spring term only and earned a cumulative life 3.0 GPA or the cumulative institutional home GPA by the end of the spring term. So if they have met the 30 credit hours and 3.0 life or home institution GPA, the institutions would review eligibility for summer and or fall at this time. This is consistent with the existing end of spring term eligibility review practices. So summer award can be dispersed if the student is enrolled in at least 12 credit hours over the course of the summer enrollment term. Enrollment verification would occur at the established date as determined by the regulations for eligibility to receive scholarship funds. Eligibility review would not be required. And then, so for students for the next fall term, they would be eligible if they earned 30 credit hours and either the 3 or equivalent, and then either the cumulative 3.0 life GPA or the cumulative home institution 3.0 GPA at the end of the spring term. So we're not looking at summer when we determine fall eligibility. We did it at the end of spring. Any credit hours or grades earned over summer would be used towards continuing eligibility for the next spring term. So this graphic pretty much says the same thing. So at the end of the spring term, if the student is eligible for fall, they would also be eligible for summer. So if they go summer term and they choose not to use the scholarship, let's say they're not full-time, so they would still be eligible for the fall term based off their end of spring eligibility. Let's say they go summer and they use the scholarship, they would still be eligible for fall based off their end of spring eligibility. And so it really doesn't matter how the student does summer term when we're talking about the immediate fall. Whatever they do during the summer term, whether they use the scholarship or not, will be counted in eligibility requirements for the next spring term. Ineligible students. So if the student is eligible for fall, they were in 12 plus credit hours. They're eligible for spring if they're in 12 plus credit hours. Not eligible for summer, fall. Student earned less than 30 credit hours and its equivalent, or they earned less than a 3.0 life GPA or cumulative home institution GPA. Remediation period, student has Maymester and or summer term to earn the requisite credit hours in GPA. This would be an out-of-pocket expense incurred by the student. So they would not receive any funding from state scholarships or grants to attend summer term. If the student is not eligible at the end of summer, the next review of eligibility for scholarships funds to occur would be the following spring. So the one caveat that I would add here is that once a student loses their Palmetto Fellows, they cannot regain their Palmetto Fellows but they can be considered for life eligibility. So eligible for fall if the student earned at least 30 credit hours or equivalent hours and earned at least a 3.0 cumulative life GPA or home institution GPA by the end of the summer or Maymester term. So this is basically the visual of that chart. So student cannot use the scholarship to attend summer to, however, at the end of summer, student would be reevaluated and the student could either be determined to be ineligible for the scholarship, which means they would not receive the scholarship for that coming academic year, or they could be reevaluated and determined to be eligible and then receive the scholarship for that immediate fall term and next academic year. Okay, transcripts. We've had a lot of questions from institutions and high schools on transcripts, so we just want to cover a couple things about some of the things that you should be looking at on a transcript for state scholarship purposes. So all transcripts have to say South Carolina Uniform Grading Policy, SCUGP. We don't take transcripts that say weighted or unweighted or total GPA if it does not say anywhere on there that they're using the SCUGP GPA. All final official transcripts must be date calculated between 3 days prior to the date of high school graduation and no later than June 15th. And they cannot include any grade or ranking information after the official graduation date of the school year. And so that's why we have the date calculated, because summer school grades remediation cannot be included on that transcript or in that calculation. Okay, so additional scholarship requirements. So when you're looking at transcripts for, and this is, we cover this for Palmetto Fellows, but in the financial aid office, you would predominantly be looking at this for life. So it has to have a valid signature. It can be electronic or otherwise. It usually should be from the principal. If it's an independent or private or homeschool, the administrator could be the registrar, and so they can notify CHE on letterhead if they've had a staffing change and that signature is going to change. The SCUGP GPA has to be demonstrated on the transcript. It has to have a date calculated. We just went over those parameters. And if the school ranks, rank has to be on the transcript. No ands, ifs, buts about it. If you get a transcript that doesn't have rank, that is not, they are not compliant with the rank regulations, and that is not a ranking institution. So out-of-state high schools, we covered this briefly before. So students can qualify for Palmetto Fellows coming from an out-of-state institution. However, their transcript is not going to say SCUGP GPA. So that is going to have to be converted. They convert that to CHE when we get the application. So CHE will have that on file. It's not something that you necessarily will be looking for. However, if you get a family in your office and they're asking about it, we have very few students who come from out of state that meet the eligibility requirements for rank from an out of state high school. And so let me explain that just a little further. So when we are looking at SCUGP and rank, they have to be ranked off the South Carolina Uniform Grading Policy. So it's very easy to convert one transcript for one student who moved. But when that student is trying to meet class rank, the school in the other state would have to convert all of the transcripts for that class to the SCUGP GPA, and then they would need to rank them, and then they would need to be willing to provide us with a class rank report showing the out-of-state GPA, the SCUGP GPA, and showing that that student is meeting the top 6% of that class, with the whole class being ranked with SCUGP GPA. That's usually where we lose them. They don't have enough staff in order to be able to convert all of them. I'm not going to say it hasn't been done. We have a couple schools right on the border of Georgia. They've built that into their district plan, but that is the first thing I tell them. They need to find out if the homeschool from the out of state will do that. But then we also have to take a look at their rank policy to make sure that they are ranking all of their students as required by South Carolina regulation. So we've had schools that were willing to convert, but their rank policy didn't meet our rank requirements. So when we're talking about rank for the purposes of Life and Palmetto Fellows, Life Scholarship is the top 30% of the graduating class, and the regulation specifically states that it cannot be rounded up to the next whole number. So if your life calculation of top 30 ends up being 48.9 students, you're going to be, your top 30% would be 48 students. That 0.9 is going to fall off. For Palmetto Fellows, it's the exact opposite. So for top 6%, the regulation allows you to round to the next whole number. So if your top 6% comes out to be 7.6 students, we're going to take your 8 students. We're going to go ahead and round that up to the next whole number. In the event of a tie, the high school or homeschool association is responsible for breaking that tie. Commission staff cannot assist in breaking a class tie. So rank policy, I mentioned it before with the out of state. So what the regulation state has to be included in a rank policy in order for it to be considered compliant for state scholarship ranking. It must say that it's based off the SCUGP GPA. It must rank all academic classes at the end of the academic year, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. It must include the entire class. All diploma seeking students have to be included. If they are pulling kids out because they know that they're not going to school in South Carolina, that would definitely make the class not eligible for ranking. Rank in SCUGP must be demonstrated on the official transcript submitted to CHE or the eligible South Carolina institution. So that transcript you get from them must have rank on it if they are ranking. So rank policies, I talked about us looking at rank policies when we go out to we try and update them every 3 years to make sure they're compliant. So we're looking at school profiles, we're looking at student and parent handbooks, we're checking the school website. The students and the parents have to know that the institution is ranking. And so that information has to be available to CHE, but it also needs to be available to our colleges and universities that are awarding funding. So when we are looking at rank reports, the information that needs to be included on a rank report, obviously it must very clearly tell us the school, what school is submitting the rank report. It needs to show school name and class. It must also show all diploma seeking students in the class. It must list their GPAs. It must list their class rank, and it needs to say a date calculated. And that date calculated can be no later than June 15th each year. So we do say that it needs to say the words date calculated. However, the South Carolina Department of Education's Power School does not show the words date calculated. However, it will print the date right before the school name. So we will accept that for our public schools, but any of our private or homeschool associations, their rank reports need to say date calculated on them. We will not accept a date printed or anything like that. And so when we're looking at rank reports to transcripts, we are matching the information, GPA, rank, and date calculated between them. We will accept a fluctuation in date calculated as long as GPA and class rank match. So most of you guys are aware of this. I hope this has made an impact in your processing for the year. We did send a memo on June 15th of this year, letting the institutions know we can now house rank reports in our Palmetto Fellows portal for the schools to be able to access, the institutions to be able to access to award life scholarship eligibility based off rank. So because our portal was done late this year, we made this year eligible. However, class of 24, it will be a requirement that all rank reports be submitted to CHE. So you guys won't be receiving rank reports. You'll just log into the portal and you'll be able to see them in the portal. So a couple things that we like to define. We do this for our high schools. We have two different sets of verbiage that we use at CHE. So early graduate, we define as a senior graduating mid-year, not during the spring cohort. So they can graduate anytime during the senior year other than the spring cohort. So when they do that, they are pulled out of the class rank. So for the life scholarship eligibility, that student cannot use rank as an eligibility criterion. So they would need a test score if they're graduating any term other than the spring cohort of their senior year. For Palmetto Fellows, the student can qualify with class rank from the end of 10th or 11th grade year. However, in this, we made this red. Those students have to have their application into their counselor at their high school, and it has to be submitted to CHE prior to the student completing their high school graduation requirements. So the regulations specifically state that a student cannot become a Palmetto Fellow after high school graduation. So they can't graduate and then try and submit an application to us 6 months later. So that has to be done first. We have asked the high schools to add that to their early graduate checklist. However, if you're talking to a family and they're talking about leaving early and maybe enrolling at your campus in January, this is something I would highly encourage you point out to them. They need to take care of this before they graduate from high school. The next one we call graduating early. I know these are confusing. We define graduating early as a student who graduates academic year or years early, but they will be graduating in the spring cohort of their new graduation year. So for Hope and Life, eligibility is based on the end of the academic year with the student's new graduating class. Because they are graduating in that spring cohort, they will be ranked with their new class. So they will have a final 12th grade rank. For Palmetto Fellows, the early award application period can use end of 10th or end of 11th grade rank, but it must have an end of 11th grade GPA. So what we are seeing most frequently in this scenario for a student who is graduating early, they are skipping 11th grade. So that means that student cannot be submitted during the early award period because they have no final 11th grade GPA. However, they can be submitted in the late award period using either 10th grade rank or 12th grade rank, and they would use their final 12th grade GPA. Whew.